Today we're back with covering more Deltarune Chapter 3 unused content, specifically here diving into numerous unused maps related to the console board games featured in this chapter. We got early maps, test maps, and even some featuring a completely different style of the games. And before we get going, a quick shout out to Factor for sponsoring this video. Life can get busy to have enough time to cook, but you don't have to settle for mediocre tasting TV dinners or junk food, as in just 2 minutes in the microwave you can fuel up with Factor's amazing line of meals. Featuring an extensive selection of delicious restaurant quality meals that rotate weekly, there are meal options for pretty much anyone's tastes. Now, my biggest problem with eating is definitely portion control, but thankfully, Factor's protein-packed portioned meals help me stay within my daily calorie goals, especially with their healthiest menu yet. So if you would like to try out some of Factor's clean and wholesome meals, head on over to factor75.com or click the link in the description and use code TBGFB50 to get 50% off, plus get free breakfast meals for 1 year. That's code TBGFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off and free breakfast for 1 year. Anyways, with all that said, grab your controllers and smack that like button below. It's time to check out some more Deltarune Chapter 3 Lost Bits. Alright, so I teased it a whole lot in my previous videos, so I won't keep you waiting any longer. Let's start things off here with the scrapped third board game, simply and fittingly referred to as Board 3. So, like I believe I mentioned in my previous videos, a variation of this board does get used as part of the optional side quest in this chapter to get the Shadow Mantle. But what ended up getting used there is quite different than what's seen here in this originally planned third board game. So, this board starts us off in front of this Tenna building, which as we can see requires 2 queues to enter. And we can also find Tenna here, who just defaults to some placeholder test NPC text. The door also has some text that I don't believe is used in the used version of this area, as it introduces this building as TV Tower, and it also mentions a no shoes, no queues, no service policy. Going south leads to the bustling commercial district, where we can find Tenna once again, but this time with some more proper functional dialogue. Then entering this shop here leads to a room with a Pippins, a camera, as well as a pair of lancers, because why not? You can pick up the camera for free, and then you can actually not only grab the lancer that's shown to be for sale for free, but also the shopkeeper lancer too. And then the Pippins that asks for help for 100 points turns out to be a scam, as it just runs off and calls you a sucker. Anyways, going left from this area takes us to a Tenna bridge, which looks quite a bit different than how it does in the used version of this board, with the Tenna Statue of Liberty in the middle here. And as you can see, there are also these falling rocks that aren't seen in the used version either. The next room just has a shadow guy that results in a battle against a Zapper and a Pippins. And then going down from here, we can find the first Quizler of the board, but this one is shy, so it runs away off screen if you get too close to it. And this is actually the Quizler that uses the leg sprites that are otherwise unused in this chapter. So, to prevent the Quizler from taking off, you actually have to snap a picture of it, which causes it to lose its legs. Yeah, kinda brutal if you think about it. Anyways, this quiz actually has questions that I don't believe are used anywhere else in this chapter, with the first asking what CRT stands for, one asking which TV channel is the most popular, which is apparently the Weather Channel, and then lastly there's this question asking which of the cables here is the composite video cable. And this actually uses the otherwise unused placeholder graphic that I covered back in part 1. Clearing this quiz gets us our first queue, and then back from the shop area going right, we can find another Tenna with test text. South from there is another enemy encounter, and further south is a desert cactus field in the middle of the city, which, come to think of it, is kinda weird. And then to the right from there, we can make our way to the Entertainment District, which just has another Tenna at the end, who has a little interaction with the Tenna sitting near the players. And then going left from the cactus field takes us to a waterfront area where all the way to the left we can see another Quizler just sitting and chilling, once again using sprites that aren't used anywhere else in this chapter. But we can't make our way over there just yet, as we need to find a way to get to those stairs. And it turns out that taking a picture of the top right cactus in the field here will cause it to blush, revealing some secret stairs after pushing it aside. This then takes us to a short underground segment, which, you guessed it, leads us up to the Sit-in Quizler. The questions here this time include remembering Lancer's name, answering that Asgore's favorite show is a cowboy show, which I guess explains the cowboy section of this chapter, and then the last question asks when Asgore's favorite cowboy puppet show airs, and this one's easy as all the choices are the same for it being cancelled. With 2 cues now, you can take the raft across the water and head back to TV Tower to crash on in. Once in, going left takes us to a cool game in-game version of the TV Time game show stage. And if you take a picture of the screen in the back, you can actually reveal a secret message that just reads, "Word." Yep, that sure is a word alright. Then going to the right, we can see an elevator door as well as whatever this thing is. Apparently it's a banister blocking our path. Trying to use the elevator door reveals that you actually need a Mooncloud keycard to open it. And yep, if you didn't watch part 3, that's the same keycard that we obtained through playing in some of the unused backstage rooms. Anyways, for now, assuming you don't have it, Tenna will now remove the banister and he mentions that you can just take the stairs instead. But it turns out that the doors to the stairs require 2 more cues. Great. Well, the 2 cues quickly turn into 20, and then Tenna reveals that you have to backtrack to do 20 more quizzes and that the TV tower has 100 floors, which seems to have been a change from this unused sprite that I covered in my previous videos that showed it having 20 floors instead. Anyways, Tenna starts getting all excited about all the different TV tower floors, but as he goes yapping, Susie will lose grip on a tube of yogurt, which then goes flying and falls right back on her controller, which results in a yogurt emergency, which cuts things short and seemingly ends the board. Now, since the Mooncloud keycard is normally unobtainable, that would be about it for this section. But assuming you could get it as intended via the rooms that were also scrapped, at some point the player could return to this board in a version of it called Board 3B. And then you could use the keycard on the door here, which surprises Tenna, and this leads to an elevator that's very reminiscent of the one in Chapter 1's Card Castle, and I'm sure that's no coincidence. And while in this elevator, you can actually gain control of Susie for some reason, who you can use to interact with Chris or throw Ralsei around. Oh, and as we take this elevator up, on the sides of the screen we can also see sprites of this tape as well as this car that are otherwise unused in this chapter. Then getting off the elevator brings us to this room with a large keyhole, and conveniently the key for it is just right here. And I guess it now makes sense why we're forced to control Susie, as we have to pick up the key and throw it into the hole to unlock it, and then the screen cuts to black, and Tenna then introduces the Susie-Zilla minigame. So yeah, if you were wondering why Susie-Zilla just got relegated to the A-rank room instead of being featured on the same level as the Chef or Rock Band minigame, well, it's because it was originally actually planned to have been introduced at the end of this 3rd board game. Now that's about it for board 3. I think it's short and sweet, and I think it's too bad that it ended up getting cut, and considering how it's like 95% complete, the decision to scrap this board must have been made quite late in this chapter's development. And according to an interview Toby Fox gave, apparently this whole chunk of the chapter with this board game and the whole stretch of obtaining the Mooncloud keycard ended up getting cut due to perceived issues with the chapter's pacing, I guess deeming it to be too slow. Now I'm pretty sure I'm in the minority, but I honestly really enjoyed this chapter. I think it's probably my favorite, so I wouldn't have minded for it to be even longer with this extra segment. And board 3 is only scratching the surface of the unused board game maps left over in chapter 3, and next up we got board 1 Old Test. and although it takes some tweaking, it can still be made functional in this game. Here right away you can see a bunch of placeholder tile sprites all over this board, as well as these flowers and cacti that otherwise were cut from this chapter, all of which I've also covered in my previous videos. Like we theorized before, this old version of the board game was quite a bit different than what we got. Instead of being a pseudo-open world game similar to the original Legend of Zelda, based on this map, it looks like the original plan was for the game to be more like a map screen, something similar to the one seen in Super Mario Bros. 3. Anyways, the path is obviously linear here, so going in order for the tiles, first up is this Q tile, which actually causes the placeholder board game quiz wheel to pop up that I covered in previous videos, and here, depending on which section of the wheel you land on, you'll be taken to a corresponding question for either the Ralsei plush price, what time it is, or what Chris's favorite food is. Next up, we got this tile, which I can only describe it as being an explosion, referred to as a dodge tile. And this one brings up another wheel, this time with 4 outcomes: sweet, mild, spicy, and something mommy? Yeah, I don't know. But here, after you get your result, you'll enter into an action sequence where you have to dodge incoming projectiles from the flowers and cacti on screen, and sometimes also some lightning bolts from above, and it seems like the spicier your outcome on the wheel is, the more difficult the dodging sequence gets. Next is this red tile, and we again get the wheel, this time with 4 slices with enemies, numbered 1 through 4. And as you might expect, enemies means we get to do a battle encounter, and it seems no matter which result you get on the wheel, it's always just against a pair of test enemies that default to these Rudens. Next we have this E tile, and this wheel's outcomes include tax fraud, something Spamton, something Ralsei, and do a swear? Yeah, I wish these were easier to read. I'm not really sure what any of these do. I got the tax fraud result here, and I just got this sound effect to play, with no other noticeable changes. Oh, and another possible sound effect is just sans. Thought you might want to know. Next up, we got this P tile, which is the pleasure pain tile I covered in my previous videos, and as covered there, this brings up a wheel with just 2 options, pleasure or pain. The pleasure result seems to have been intended to heal the player, and conversely the pain one would deal damage, but this wasn't ever fully finished here, so each result just gets us a corresponding sound effect. For pleasure, we get this sound, and then the pain outcome results in like a warping sound effect. And then the last different tile on this board is this Dreamcast looking spiral one, and this is a warp tile that here just takes you to an empty dungeon-like room. It's unclear what these would lead to, if anything, as it looks like they were just testing functionality here, but as it stands, yeah, nothing for us here. Then after this board, next up we got board test, which seems to be a board a bit further along, as here we get some more screens. And in addition to there being more areas to check out here, there's also actually a new space that's not seen in the previous board by this body of water. When landed on, the game will give you 3 options to choose from: look, move, and item. Well, really only one option, as both move and item will bork the game as you won't be able to move anymore. But if you select look, you'll get a message saying the oasis is sparkling, and you'll be asked if you want to take a drink from it. Doing so will heal your HP a bit, and it's mentioned that it tastes like mint and sand, and refusing a sippy sip will just let you proceed. And I guess this idea eventually got reworked into the oasis seen in the first board, as you can basically do the same thing there. There's also another warp tile here that does the same thing, but this time it leads you to a room with a slightly different layout, and this one also has this little Tenna statue on the bottom right here. And that's almost it for this board, as although normally inaccessible here, there is actually yet another area loaded that appears quite broken as it is, but this looks to have been some sort of cave-like section or something. Then moving on, we have Board Test Old, where we get yet another test map of this old game style, where we see more of the same tiles, but also a new one, this magnifying glass. And this one once again brings up a menu with a new option this time, book. Selecting book gives you a sort of cryptic message saying, you chose book. And then looking here doesn't provide much more context for this book, as it just results in a everything looks pretty here message. So yeah, it's pretty mysterious. There are also these blue spiral spaces that were also in the previous maps, and they seem to have been used as the starting points, but there's 2 of them here, so I'm not sure if they had some other planned purpose, but in any case, they're not functional at all either. In this map, however, going to the bottom right actually does take us to the same cave area that we saw back in the previous room, so we can explore it a bit. There's a path you can walk in here, but unfortunately, that's about all you can do, as there aren't any other event tiles or anything that you can interact with. And then lastly, for this board, you can walk down from this area to find 2 more of them, which, as you can see, are just completely blank. But despite that, there is actually some collision here, so you can't just walk around wherever, suggesting that there were plans to expand on this map that I guess just never came to be. Then after that, we got Board Design Test, which is by far the most expansive and developed of these early boards, as it has numerous screens, dozens of event tiles, as well as branching paths. This board even introduces NPCs which you can interact with, as around the area we can find these Munmi NPCs that ended up getting cut from the rest of this chapter. Interacting with them brings up a similar option screen to the one we saw with the Oasis earlier, with the move and item options once again just freezing the game. Looking at these NPCs will result in it's some sort of Munmi message. And then talking to this first one will have it saying, I'm a Munmi girl in a Munmi world, wrapped in fabric, it's not so great. With this being an obvious joke reference to the song Barbie Girl. There are 2 more Munmis on this board, both of which have the same alternate text mentioning a crying child on the other side of some cactuses. Yes, cactuses, not cacti. There's no crying child like this left over in this board anywhere, so this seems to have been perhaps part of some story element in this chapter that ended up getting scrapped. Next, we also have these stick figure tiles referred to as adventure tiles, and these give you another option screen, this time with an option to enter. And doing so will warp you to a sort of oasis area where you can also find a Pippin's NPC here, which just defaults to the same placeholder NPC text. This map has like 3 of these tiles, and they all lead to this same oasis, and once you leave, regardless of where you enter this oasis from, you'll wind up back at the start of the board, so maybe this was some sort of quick travel method to get back to the beginning. Thankfully though, if you haven't noticed by now, I figured out a way to avoid triggering any of the tiles on a board by simply just quick tapping twice in a given direction. And this is super handy to save time when getting around a board by avoiding all of these events, and yeah, I don't think this was intentional. Anyways, in this map we also see the introduction of these plus and minus event tiles. The plus ones give you 100 points, and as an added bonus you can relish in the sound effects of a certain skeletal fella. And conversely, the minus tiles will take away 100 points with this sound effect. And that's basically it for this board. Like I said earlier, and as you can see in this full layout here, this is by far the biggest of these maps. And based on the progression, it looks like there was a decent amount of work put into these world map style versions of these board games before the decision was made to basically revamp them from the ground up into a completely different style, as we ended up seeing in the final cut of this chapter. Although I like the idea of these boards, I guess they could get pretty repetitive with all of the same event tiles over and over again, so ultimately, I think the decision to change things up was a good idea, but something like this, on a smaller scale, I think would have still been cool to see. Now, getting back to the style of these board games that we do see in this chapter, we got a few more unused maps to go, starting with board tests. Here, we start out in a sandy dungeon area, and although some areas seem to be somewhat put together, there are also several blank rooms like this. But you can actually still navigate these empty areas to get around this camera puzzle room to get to this area with a bunch of these like cracked wall tiles, as well as these cubes referred to in the files as penalty shot objects. This was also meant to be some sort of puzzle room, though in the state that it's left over in, it's hard to tell how exactly this was meant to work. Then going to the right from the spawn room, you'll encounter a Quizler for 3 rooms in a row. I'm guessing this was to test how the Quizler functioned in the overworld, as the first one here doesn't seem to chase you, while the other 2 subsequent ones do. And after those are 2 more identical rooms that are empty, suggesting that maybe more Quizlers were to be added here as well. And that's not all for this map either, as if you head south for a bit, you'll actually encounter several objects just chilling in the void without proper background tiles. And just due to how these are placed, they aren't lined up properly with how the map screens move, leaving them looking extra awkward like this. Much like some previous rooms, we also get some invisible collision here, and the other objects include the camera, ribbon, and pizza deodorant that you can pick up, and then some bombs that you can't pick up, some pots, as well as a key that costs 1,000 points, so you can only pick it up if you have at least that many. And then we also got a series of water and raft tiles, which I guess were likely a test for the puzzles that involved them in this chapter. And then there are also several rooms with these cracked tiles that seem to have been meant to be blown up by using bombs, and with these unobtainable and there not being enough rafts for most of these puzzles, needless to say, none of these are exactly completable. And finally, there's also a Pippin's NPC here that seems to be a test for cutscene triggers, as when you approach it, it will trigger some dialogue from Tenna where he mentions that his zapper got stuck again, and that he has to go, before he then slides off screen and Susie switches up the controllers. Although the dialogue is slightly different than how it's seen in this chapter, this seems to be an early version of the similar interaction that's seen in the game before, I believe, the second raft puzzle where Susie does the same controller swap. Unfortunately for this version of the cutscene though, after it's done, the game no longer lets you move. Next up is Board Boat Test, and this is exactly what it sounds like. There are 3 islands, 2 big, 1 small, and you can hop on a raft and sail your way around on this still water. The small island has this Pippin's enemy that again just defaults to placeholder dialogue, and this map also has this fully functional lawnmower area too, so I guess there was a test for that minigame here as well. And then last, but absolutely not least for the unused maps, next up we have AdventureBoardTest, where we start off in this room with these otherwise unused pink spike objects just referred to as hazards. Going south, we can find some movable blocks that don't really seem to serve any purpose here. There's a shadow guy NPC that you can actually trap inside one of the blocks, so I guess they do serve at least one purpose. And although the shadow guys are interactable, they yet again just default to a fight against a pair of test Rudins. There's a single Quizler in this map, and although seemingly inaccessible by normal means, I guess if you theoretically could power up the swords to cut through some of these cacti, there are quite a few additional rooms in this map, though based on the layout here, they all seem to be empty, so I guess we're not really missing much. But we get to the highlight of this map if we go up in the spawn room here and go through this door, which takes us to a dungeon area, and this leads to a maze-like puzzle where you have to take the correct path, otherwise you just keep getting sent back to the start. Something like this is seen as part of the optional Shadow Mantle section of Chapter 3 after the white-cloaked figure starts to follow you. But unlike there, where the hint for the correct path is that the figure will stop following you if you choose poorly, here there's no hints whatsoever, and you'll only hear a correct chime if you choose the right path. So yeah, basically just gotta guess and check your way through this one. And interestingly, the debug counter will also pop up on screen indicating how many correct paths you've chosen in a row. And after you get the 6th one right in a row, the counter actually jumps to 8 as you enter the secret ending section here. The whole area here looks like this, with 2 of these dead-end rooms on the left and right, which I assume would have had some more significance. And then the main area here is this room at the top, which has this large 2x2 sized block, which you can still push around, but there doesn't really seem to be a reason to do so, and if you push it too much to one side, it'll just get stuck there, as the room doesn't reset when you leave it or anything. I'm assuming that maybe this block was a placeholder for a large treasure chest or something that the player could have opened here after completing the maze. Anyways, it's super cool to see that the developers ended up reworking this maze idea into the final cut of this chapter, so not everything from this test map was lost. And that, my friends, is about it for all of the unused maps in Deltarune Chapter 3, specifically here, the board game ones, and I hope you enjoyed. Now, I did expect a lot of unused content in Deltarune Chapter 3, but certainly not to the extent that we ended up getting. And 21,000 plus words later, it's crazy to see the near FNAF security breach levels of there almost being a completely second game's worth of unused content left over here. And not to mention, we haven't even gone to Chapter 4 yet. I'm not sure if I'll cover it right away, as I've basically just been playing 2 games for the past 4 months, so I kinda wanna cover something else for a bit, so we'll see. But there will definitely be Chapter 4 videos at some point in the near future. Till then though, check out some of my other videos, and be sure to subscribe to the channel with the notification bell to be notified as soon as those videos are up. And as always, thank you all so much for tuning in today, and I will see you in a bit.